So Mr. Sutton argued that because his de facto relationship with Miss Bell had not commenced by November 2004, when the property was transferred in the trust, Miss Bell's rights under the act had come into existence, and he could therefore not have intended to avoid them. A reasonable argument. I would imagine at the time she would have probably said something like, well, we were sleeping in his bedroom and we were a couple, so despite what he says, you know, he was taking me on vacations. Like, here's some pictures from Facebook from 2004. Here's some pictures from MySpace or whatever social media was popular at the time. Here's some pictures from social media where he took me on vacation and we were together as a couple. And look here in the sand, it says, you know, big heart, Sutton and Bell together forever. You know, before, you know, he put it in trust, right? So again, you know, women always reserve the right to change their mind at any given time. So Ms. Bell's rights under the act could not have come into existence and could therefore not have intended to avoid them, is what they said. The court disagreed, noting that for a claim to be available under the section at the time of the disposition, the relationship must have reached a stage where there was a mutual contemplation of beginning a qualifying relationship. Therefore, the existence of de facto relationship at the time of a disposition of a property is not necessarily a precondition. So what does mutual contemplation of mean? So let's expand on that. This isn't much longer, by the way. The court considered that in most cases, the decision to live together creates a strong but rebuttable presumption that the parties have a mutual contemplation of entering into a de facto relationship. The following factors persuaded the court that at the time the property was transferred to the trust, Mr. Sutton and Mrs. Bell were contemplating a de facto relationship. Mr. Sutton and Mrs. Bell were, this is how she proved it in court, in an exclusive relationship for 16 months. So she proved at the time when the trust was created that they were in a committed relationship exclusive for 60 months, living together for 8 of those months. So clearly this chick moved in as a roommate after they started dating. Dumb move by this guy, of course. Living together for 8 months, for 8 of those months, presented as a couple to friends and family. What was I just saying? You know, taking vacations together, holding out to the public that they're a couple, holidaying together. What did I just say? Dude, I know this shit like the back of my hand. I almost threw up in my mouth there. Visiting family for Christmases. Again, another thing that I said prior before I even scrolled down to this. Planning future holidays. Emailing each other about mundane life activities such as grocery shopping, purchasing firewood, and cleaning the yard. All of this before he transferred the property into a trust. She was able to prove by keeping emails from 10 years ago, emails that said, hey, you know, when are we going to clean up the yard? Or we need to get some firewood for the wintertime. It's getting cold. She dug through emails from 10 fucking years ago to provide to the court to prove that they were in a de facto committed relationship before he created the trust. Even though she said, yeah, create the trust. It's a good idea for you to protect yourself. So the court focused on Mr. Sutton's knowledge as to the effect of transferring the property to a trust would have on Mrs. Bell's rights under the act, have no recourse to the property, and concluded that knowledge of the consequences is sufficient to establish an intent to defeat partners' interests for the purposes of Section 44. Blah, blah, blah. Basically, he did it to circumvent her ability to claim an interest in the property, which is what happens when you live together in the eyes of the law. It doesn't matter who's on title. If you live together in a way that looks like marriage to the government, and the law and family law says, okay, you're now married after this prescribed period of time or under these prescribed circumstances, i.e. Christmases together, i.e. sending an email about needing firewood together, i.e. holding out to the public that you're in a relationship, i.e. in a committed relationship on Facebook, you know, like, you know, when people do that shit, so-and-so is in a relationship. Some people do this shit every fucking 10 months. I'm in a new relationship with some new person or something like that, right? Defeat partners' interest and purposes of 44. It did not matter that Mrs. Bell supported and encouraged the creation of the trust and the transfer of the property. So he obviously tried to defend their attack by stating that she encouraged the transfer of the property to the trust. Nor did it matter that the relationship risk was not the sole driver for the transfer, and Mr. Sutton had other reasons for establishing the trust. So it didn't matter what reason he brought up. They were just like, not interested. Previously, a consensus desire to defeat your partner's rights was required in order to section blah, blah, blah. So the decision clearly illustrates the threshold much lower. Okay, blah, blah. The argument was put forward that Ms. Bell effectively contracted out of an act when she suggested that Mr. Sutton dispose the property into a trust. So the defense, Mr. Sutton's defense, basically said she's contracted out of this act by encouraging Mr. Sutton to put the property into a trust. A reasonable argument, you would think. Let's see what happened. However, the act mandates that a person cannot waive their rights unless a formal contracting out agreement has been made. You know what? Even if you had a formal, what do they call it? A formal contracting out agreement. So I bet that if you had a formal contracting out agreement, she would still try to find a way to throw that, to cast that aside, right? Therefore, although the disposition was made in good faith and with Mr. Bell's agreement, the disposition is still liable to claim under Section 44 of the Act. The court held that the High Court was correct, in fact, that Mr. Sutton transferred the property to the trust in order to defeat Miss Bell's rights. Leave to appeal the decision in the New Zealand Supreme Court has been granted, blah, blah, blah. So key takeaways, there's a couple paragraphs here from the law firms, like the lawyer that created this blog. It basically says this case clearly demonstrates that if you dispose of a property and that disposition defeats your partner's rights under the act when you are contemplating a de facto relationship, your partner will have recourse to that property under the act, which she was able to prove. She had emails about firewood and cleaning the yard and holidaying together and Christmas together and all that sort of stuff prior to when the trust was created. And I don't even think that creating a trust is sufficient at this point. You could create a trust, sit on it maybe for 2 or 3 years, meet somebody, she moves in, even though the trust exists, even though there's a prenup. And, female lawyers will argue, or females that want to be in a relationship will argue like, well, that's not me. I would never do that. You have the trust. We're not going to untie that. I'll sign a prenup. I'll everything will be fine. Do you know what would be fine? Just loving a woman and not living with her. You can totally do that too. You don't have to live with a chick. You don't have to succumb to the pressure and bend the knee and, okay, babe, whatever you say, if this makes you happy, blah, blah, fucking blah. You can still love a chick and say, no, that's a boundary. You got your place. I got my crib. We'll get together. We'll do stuff together, but you have your own house. Your mail goes to your house. Your packages go to your own house. You maintain your own property. You pay your mortgage. There's nothing here. Like this is what women have created. This is what feminism, this is what family law has created. An environment where men and women really shouldn't be living together, especially if the guy has a lot more than she does, which is generally the case in almost all circumstances. There's always one chick out there. She'll be in the comments. She'll be like, well, that's not true. My husband was a stay-at-home husband, and I climbed the corporate ladder, and we had to untie the knot, and I'm paying him alimony and child support, and this is not fair. Bullshit. Rarely happens. Does it happen? Yeah. Rarely happens, though. It is very, very uncommon. This is the commonality. Because why? Women are hypergamous. They date across and up. They don't want to be with losers on a long-term basis. They'll bang losers. They'll bang criminals. They'll go to nightclubs and do all kinds of nefarious shit with loser men, right? But when it comes to partnering, de facto relationships, common law, having kids and all that sort of stuff, totally different game. Now, let's keep going anyway, because it's got like one last paragraph here. Contemplating under the act. The transition from dating relationship to a de facto is a de facto one is an evolution and can be a real gray area, because that's what we need as guys, is more gray areas in our life. We have enough fucking struggles in our life with shit that we're doing, with our own challenges. We need more gray areas, because the chick's like, well, is this going anywhere? Like, do you even love me? Because if you don't, then we're probably not should be together, because we should live together, because everybody else lives together. Why don't we live together? And then guys are like, okay, whatever you say, baby. Right? Because they're pussies. They don't have a backbone. This is why this podcast, this is why my book is so incredibly important, because I'm the only guy out there calling out this bullshit. Transitioning from a dating relationship to fact. However, if you are considering moving in with your partner, I hate that word partner, wife, or girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, be clear. This fucking blurring of lines, partner. Or your relationship is developing, then it is important that you take formal steps to protect your separate property rights. Well, this guy did that, and it didn't fucking work out too good for him, did it? The most important being entering into a contracting out agreement, which again, is just another layer of bullshit and fuckery that you got to introduce into your life, which is not guaranteed. The only thing that is guaranteed is not living together. Again, you can love a woman and not live together. You know, I've often said, here, let me finish this. Is also known as a relationship property agreement. While these agreements can seem costly and awkward, they are the best way to protect your separate property. I bet if I looked up those keywords under case law in New Zealand, relationship property agreement, I bet if I did some Googling, I could find case law where women have also fucking untied that contract and weren't able to contract out of that because of some fucking reason, because there's an email or a text message about how some fucking firewood needed to get collected because it's getting cold or some shit, right? But guys don't listen to me. All the tradcons, all the Christ pillars, all these fucking hopeful romantics, hopeless idiots think that everything will be just fine, tickety-boo, hunky-dory, and all right because my girl is different. By the way, they had 2 kids together, which wasn't talked about in the summary, but that wasn't part of the issue with the property. That case was specific to the issue of the property. They had 2 children together, and I'm sure he's paying child support for those 2 children. The article doesn't talk about any kind of maintenance or alimony. I don't know if he's obligated to do that, but he is obligated to give her half of the value of the house, which he already gave half of the value to his first wife before this one moved in. So let's hope he's learned his lesson. I really hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to watch the full-length podcast, you can find that over here, that clip's from. If you're newer to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe over here and pin down below in the top comment. You'll find a bunch of useful links to my website, my supplement line, books, and a bunch of other stuff. Have an amazing day. Peace out.